We've been walking through this Order of Detox series, and I wanted to connect some of the dots before we move forward. So, we started with water because your body cannot detox without it. Every system depends on hydration. Then we talked about reducing what's coming in your air, your food, your environment, because it doesn't make any sense to keep pouring toxins into the body while trying to get them out. Then we moved into opening elimination pathways, your liver, lymphatics, kidneys, bowels, and skin, making sure that your body actually has a way to release what it's dealing with. Because if those pathways aren't open, detox doesn't work the way you think it will. And now we're stepping into the next phase, infections. But before we go there, I want to remind you of something really important about that order. When it comes to toxins and infections, parasites can play a very unique role in the body. You can think of them as little trash trucks. They pick up and hold on to things like heavy metals, bacteria, environmental toxins, things your body is trying to contain. So when we're working through this process, we often address parasites before we go deep into toxin removal. Because if those trash trucks are still moving about the body full of junk, they're going to be messing things up. And you're actually not really getting rid of toxins. You're just moving things around. And this is where so many women I work with get stuck. They're doing detoxes, taking supplements, trying protocols, and they either don't feel better or they feel worse. And it's often not because they're not doing the right things. It's because they're doing them out of order. Your body needs water, clean input, open pathways. Then we can begin addressing infections. So now let's talk about infections. And I want you to hear this clearly. When I say infections, I'm not talking about something obvious like cold or flu, although they do count as infections. I'm talking about what your body may be dealing with quietly in the background every single day for possibly years, and not having a specific symptom to say this is a blank infection. And for many women, this is typically the missing piece. You're doing everything right, but your energy still isn't there. One of the biggest misunderstandings I see is people trying to match one symptom to one problem. But your body doesn't work that way. All of these different types of infections, viral, bacterial, fungal, parasitic, tick-borne, they all create very similar symptoms. So whether it's brain fog, fatigue, mood shifts, inflammation, digestive upset, you can't always tell what's going on just by how you feel. And when we have multiple things happening at once, which is very common, they start to stack. And that can trigger a histamine response in your body. Histamine is part of your body's natural defense system. It's something your body releases when it feels like it needs to protect you. It could be from an allergen, a toxin, or an infection. So when you have different pathogens, fungal, bacterial, parasitic, viral, all layering together, your immune system can stay in a more activated state. And that can keep histamine levels higher than they should be. And this is where people start telling me things like, I feel inflamed all over. I react to everything. I feel I can't eat anything anymore. My skin is breaking out and itching. My sinuses are always bothering me. I get headaches for no reason at all. My heart feels like it races sometimes. I feel anxious or on edge, and I don't know why. And what's important to understand is that those symptoms can feel all over the place. They don't point to one single cause, but they're often connected through this histamine response. So instead of chasing each of these symptoms individually, we step back and ask what is causing the body to stay in this heightened reactive state. Because when we calm what's underneath, the whole system can begin to settle. When we are in that calm state is when healing takes place, not just survival or covering up of a symptom. Your body isn't overreacting for no reason. It's trying to protect you. And that's when people tell me, I just feel inflamed all over. I react to everything. My body's on edge. It's not random. That's your system being overwhelmed. So instead of chasing symptoms, we step back and look at what's underneath. Your immune system is one of the most energy demanding systems in your body. If it is constantly on, even at a low level, it will drain your energy reserves and you will be tired all the time. That can show up as brain fog, hormonal imbalances, emotional overwhelm, not because your body's broken, but because it's protecting itself and trying to heal. Your body isn't failing you, it's fighting for you. Let's expand what we mean by infection, because this is where most people misunderstand. We're talking about viruses, bacteria, fungal overgrowth, parasites, and tick-borne infections. These don't always show up as something acute. They show up as your everyday symptoms, and combined, they can make you feel miserable. Fungal infections, we're going to start there. I've seen this personally in my own family. There was a severe fungal infection that took close to a year for doctors to identify because no one was even looking for it. A relative of mine had a major rash on her legs that were swollen, painful for months on end. The doctors threw everything they knew at it, but the rash persisted. She was exhausted. She couldn't work. In constant pain, her skin was thrashed until they recognized it was a fungal issue. The medications she took for it more than likely drained her body of more of its energy because it wasn't identified correctly. I personally got what I think was a fungal infection on the way back from my honeymoon about 32 years ago. A small little tickle in my throat began to grow into a hacking cough for months. Doctors kept putting me on antibiotics, but it only worsened. I was coughing so bad that I broke 2 ribs. Serious stuff here. When I finally decided to fire my doctor and get vitamin C, probiotics, and Chinese herbs, my progress finally began. What I had been fighting for 2 months was gone in 6 days. Identifying your pathogen is very important, and that's why I use lab tests. I don't want anyone to suffer the way that I did. It was miserable. Not all fungus is bad. Candida is a fungus, and so many people think they need to get rid of all the candida in their body, but we should have some in our body. It's when it grows out of normal balance when we see yeast-like infections identified. So now let's talk about bacteria, because this is one area where I see a lot of misunderstanding. Most people think bacteria equals bad, but that's actually not how your body was designed. Your body was designed to live in relationship with bacteria. You have bacteria in your gut, on your skin, and throughout your body, and a lot of it is actually there to support you. We actually have more bacteria cells in our body than the number of our human cells. I've been told that before on a number of occasions. Good bacteria play a major role in digestion. They help break your food down so you can actually absorb the nutrients. So you can be eating all the right things, but if your bacterial balance is off, you may not be getting what your body needs from that food. The skin microbiome is another aspect, and it's not just an internal kind of thing. We have bacteria on our skin that are part of our protective barrier. They can defend against invasion and irritation, supporting healing and maintaining balance. Hand sanitizers are another thing that drive me nuts. One reason I'm not a big fan of them is because it doesn't just remove harmful bacteria, it also disrupts the beneficial bacteria that are there to protect you. So over time, you can actually weaken that very important natural defense system. So bacteria have a very unique role. And here's something that I think most people don't think about. Certain types of bacteria actually help break down the waste in your body. They assist in cleaning up dead tissue and debris, things your body needs to remove. So again, bacteria aren't something to eliminate. They're part of the body maintenance itself. So the issue isn't bacteria itself, it's the imbalance. One of the most common areas that an imbalance shows up is in the gut. And you may have too much of certain types of bacteria and not enough of the beneficial ones. This can look like digestion that's inconsistent, bloating that comes and goes, gas when eating certain foods, or feeling like food just sits there. And over time, it can affect your energy because you're not breaking down and absorbing the nutrients the way you should. Sometimes bacteria can grow in places they're not meant to be in high amounts, or they can overgrow beyond what your body can manage. That's when people often notice more discomfort after eating, more pressure, more bloating, more sensitivity to foods that didn't bother them before. So imbalance in the bacteria of the skin on your body, when it's disrupted, you may notice irritations, breakouts, skin that doesn't feel as resilient. Acne is a really common one when it comes to bacteria. Sometimes after being on an antibiotic, you can experience a yeast overgrowth that appears on the tongue or in your armpits. Those good bacteria that are protecting you and there for your benefit were killed off by that antibiotic, and the yeast ends up jumping in to help break things down, causing rashes, irritation, and mucus growth that is not in balance with the body. It's more of a low-grade imbalance throughout the body. That can feel like inflammation, inconsistent energy, and just not feeling right in your body. So why does this happen? There are a lot of factors. Antibiotic use, diet, stress, environmental exposures, and all of those can shift balance over time. And this is where we want to slow down again, because the goal is not just kill bacteria. The goal is to restore balance. If you go at it too aggressively, you can disrupt the beneficial bacteria even further and overwhelm your system if your body isn't ready to clear what's being stirred up. If you're someone who has tried protocols before and don't feel good on them, that doesn't mean your body can't heal. It means you need support for your body in the right order and the right pace for your situation. This is why I test. This is why we open up elimination pathways first. And this is why we listen to what your body is communicating instead of forcing it. Your body is designed to heal. And when we remove the blocks and you give it what it needs, it'll take place. So bacterial imbalance is one piece of the picture. And as you can see, it's not always obvious, but it can have a real impact on how you feel day to day. Now, let's talk about parasites, because this is where everything we've discussed can start to come together. A parasite is an organism that survives by drawing nutrients from a host to the detriment of the host. And what makes this important is that parasites don't just exist on their own. They tend to accumulate what's already in the body, bacteria, toxins, heavy metals, and use that environment to survive. So instead of being a separate issue, they often become part of the large picture, layered into everything else your body is trying to manage. When most people hear the term parasites, they think of something extreme, something that happens in other countries, or something that's very obvious. But the reality is, parasites are far more common than most people realize. And there are many different types. Some are microscopic, some are larger, some stay primarily in the digestive system, and others move around into different areas of the body. There are hundreds of different species that can affect humans. And even within those, there are variations. And this is important to understand because most conventional testing doesn't do a great job of identifying them. Even more advanced labs are often limited to what's happening in the GI tract. But parasites are not always limited to the digestive system. They can be in different tissues, different systems, and that's part of why they can be so hard to pinpoint. So let's go back to that parasite definition. A parasite is an organism that survives by drawing nutrients from a host to the detriment of the host. That means they eat your nutrition and drain your energy, leaving you exhausted, frustrated, and wondering why you hadn't felt like yourself for a long time. Let's go a little deeper into how parasites function. Parasites are survival driven. They're just not living in your body. They're interacting with it. They tend to accumulate and hold on to things like heavy metals and other toxins. And they often coexist with other stressors like bacterial imbalances and tick-borne infections, including Lyme-type patterns. So they're not just one isolated issue. They can become part of a larger picture. And this is where it gets interesting because parasites don't always show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it looks like digestion, but it just isn't consistent. One of the things I hear often is cravings, especially for sweets. And that's because parasites can influence the environment they live in and they thrive in certain conditions. Something people don't always expect is that parasites can be connected to both weight loss and weight gain. For some people, the body isn't absorbing nutrients well, so even if you're eating, your body isn't getting what it needs, so you may lose weight. Others can create more inflammation, more stress in the system, and the body may hold onto weight as a protective response. There can also be patterns of fatigue that doesn't quite make sense. Energy comes and goes or just isn't where it should be. Here's something a lot of people notice but don't connect. Sleep disruptions around the full moon and the new moon. Parasites can tend to be more active during those times, and people can feel that. Pay attention to sleep disturbances, and if they hit those times of the month, you may need to focus on parasite cleansing. Teeth grinding, especially at night, can also be a sign that the nervous system is being irritated. Joint weakness, and I've seen this show up in joint discomfort or weakness, and something I experienced personally years ago was related to this. The parasite strongyloides can gravitate towards areas of previous injury. I had injured my hips in a 28 car accident over 30 years ago. I wasn't at fault, I promise. At one point a few years back, I discovered limited movement in my left hip. It wasn't painful. It just couldn't lift my leg higher than the level of a stair step. And years later, at a bioresonance muscle testing class, I discovered that I had strongyloides in that joint. And that bioresonance testing also showed me that there was Lyme disease in that joint. So years later, that unexplained weakness that had actually gone away could be associated with a parasite infection. And just to touch on this briefly, when parasites are present, especially in large amounts, they can contribute to that overall histamine or inflammatory response we talked about earlier. This is where I want to slow down again, because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. There are many different types of parasites, and they don't all respond to the same support. Sometimes the goal is directly to address them, and sometimes it's about making the body less hospitable for them, evicting them, but not necessarily killing them. Supporting digestion, improving the internal environment, and strengthening the body all matter. This is especially important if you're someone who is sensitive. If your body is dealing with a higher load, we need to move slowly, or you will feel worse. And we know how to adjust because we've done it many times, but that doesn't mean that your body can't handle parasite removal or detox. It means that we need to work at the pace that is right for your body, according to your capacity. This is something that I have walked through with many clients. We don't force the body, we work with it. And this brings us back to the beginning of this series. We reinforce water, removing toxin input, and opening elimination pathways. And then when the body is ready, we can begin addressing parasites in a way that actually supports healing. Your body's designed to heal when we remove the blocks and give it what it needs. So parasites are another important piece of the picture. And as you can see, it's not always obvious, but it can have a real impact on how your body is functioning. So as you're hearing this, you might be realizing some of those familiar patterns, the fatigue that doesn't make sense, brain fog, ups and downs of emotions that can't quite explain, lack of sleep at certain times during the month. I want you to hear this. There is a reason your body feels this way. You're not making it up and your body isn't working against you. There are layers, and that's what's going on. And for some people, one of those layers that hasn't been looked at is tick-borne infections. One thing that's really important right now, tick-borne illnesses are on the rise. That includes things like anaplasmosis, which is becoming more common. I was at a conference over the last weekend, and we as practitioners share a lot. Something that had become much more common is anaplasmosis. Have you ever heard of it? I hadn't until about a year ago. One of the other interesting things that came up during our education presentation, these types of illnesses are not just from ticks anymore. Among scientists, there is a growing consensus that mosquitoes and even spiders can play a role in transmission patterns. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness, because many women have symptoms that point in this direction and no one has connected the dots. So you may be wondering, why am I talking about tick-borne illnesses separately from bacteria? Because traditionally, many of these have been classified as bacterial infections. But what we're seeing, both clinically and in practice, is that they don't always behave like typical bacteria. One of the reasons they can be so difficult to identify is that they can interfere with how the immune system responds. So instead of seeing a clear, strong immune reaction on lab work, the response can be muted or inconsistent. And that's part of why people can go through conventional testing and be told everything looks normal, even though they're dealing with real symptoms, and it just doesn't always show up in the way we expect it to. Tick-borne illnesses tend to act more like complex infections. They can shift, adapt, and interact with the body in ways that aren't always straightforward. So when we talk about tick-borne and related infections, we're talking about Lyme disease, Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, anaplasmosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and even valley fever. And the reason I separate these out is because they often require a more thoughtful, individualized approach. They're not always something you address the same way you would a typical bacterial imbalance. So instead of trying to force them into a category, We look at how they're functioning in the body and respond accordingly. And when we have a viral pattern or a viral load, viruses are different from bacteria and parasites. They're not living organisms in the same way, and they rely on your own cells to replicate. What I see more often with clients isn't necessarily an acute infection. It's more of a lingering pattern where the immune system is still engaged over time, and this adds another load to the already overburdened immune system. So instead of focusing on, is there a virus or not, we look at how the body is responding. Is the immune system under strain? Is the body able to recover the way it should? And this is where viral load becomes very important to understand. Because when we think about viruses, most people think of something you catch, and then it's either there or it's not. But many of the viruses that affect energy and resilience don't actually work that way. Viruses like herpes have many different forms, and most people carry some version of them in their body, even if they've never noticed an outbreak or don't think they were exposed in the typical way. Another big one I see often is Epstein-Barr virus, what we know as mono. For many people, that was something they had years ago, but it doesn't always fully leave the system. Or they may have not been diagnosed with it earlier because the body's compensation mechanisms kicked in at a younger age and when they were in a better situation to be dealing with the virus. You didn't know there was an issue. A virus can stay quiet in the background and then resurface when the body is under strain. And that's the key. These viruses tend to rear their ugly heads in an already burdened system. So when you're looking at things like toxin buildup, mitochondrial stress, or nutritional deficiencies, those are the very things that can allow a virus to become more active again. A good example is chickenpox. Most people had it as a child and think it's done. But that same virus can reactivate later on in life as shingles. And that reactivation usually happens during times of stress, physical exhaustion, other infections, toxin overload, or even emotional strain. So instead of thinking about viruses as something separate, I want you to start seeing them as part of the overall load your body is carrying. And when that total load gets too high, the body has a harder time keeping those viruses quiet. Because of how viruses behave in the body, we're not just trying to kill something off. We're really focused on supporting the body so it can keep things in balance. That's where two things become really important. First, lowering the overall load on the body, reducing toxins and other infections, supporting nutrition, helping the mitochondria produce energy, because when the body has the resources it needs, it can manage these patterns much more effectively. And secondly, using tools that support the body's communication and response, like homeopathics. Homeopathics don't force the body, they work with it. They help guide the body's response and remind the body of how to heal itself. It can begin to recognize and handle what's been lingering. So instead of pushing harder, we're actually creating the conditions for the body to do what it was designed to do in the first place. So again, we're not chasing labels. We're listening to what your body is communicating and supporting it accordingly. We're looking at patterns of stress on the body and how to support it. And I want you to feel encouraged here, because when we understand the layers, we can begin to work through them step by step at your body's pace. So now we've identified all the possible culprits. It's tempting to go into a full wipe everything out mode, but your body doesn't respond well to that approach. At least if you've tried it, you've discovered that. If your body can't eliminate what you're stirring up, you can feel worse and cause a greater histamine response felt throughout the body. And it can cause even greater emotional distress. What do we always do? Hydration. Reducing intake of toxins and even pathogens. Washing your hands and produce really well helps. Then we open up those beautifully designed elimination pathways. Then we get to the infections. Your body needs prep to happen first before we can evict parasites, target bacteria, or address tick-borne illnesses. If you're someone who has tried things and felt worse, I want you to hear this. You're not doing it all wrong. Your body just needs a different pace. This is something I've worked through with many of my clients. We don't push your body. We listen to it. We work within your body's capacity, not against it. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. What works for one person may not work for another. I have some clients that respond beautifully to supplements to address infections, while others need homeopathic remedies primarily. I use a wide variety of healing modalities. All infections are not the same, and not all bodies are as easy to identify the infection they're struggling with. That's why we test. We want to know what we're dealing with and match it with the right response and support for the body. The root cause landscape shows us if infections are at all a part of your picture. And if we need to go deeper, there's a Tickborne panel, one of the most accurate tools we have for identifying those types of infections. We can do a gut zoomer for gut bacteria and make sure that that's imbalance. And we can even do some bioresonance testing for parasites. I want you to hear this clearly. Your body is not failing you. That inflammation is your body's beautiful response to challenges, and it's a way of protecting you and keeping you alive. Your body is communicating. God designed your body to heal itself when we remove the blocks and give it what it needs. I'm not a healer. I'm a guide and coach to support you through the identification process and support you through the removal of all of those roadblocks that are limiting your healing. If you're wondering if infection could be part of what's draining you, that's exactly where the root cause landscape helps uncover. Start here. Get clarity. It's inexpensive and easy to do. And then we can walk through the process step by step together to determine what those infections would be if that comes up as a high number. Now, I want to leave you with some encouragement because I know we've covered a lot today. When you hear about infections, parasites, or all of these different layers, it can feel heavy. It can feel hopeless. But this is where I want you to shift your perspective. This isn't overwhelming. It's actually clarifying, and it gives us direction. I had a client come to me, and her main concern was ongoing bladder infections. She'd been dealing with repeated urinary tract infections, taking antibiotics over and over, and just not getting lasting results. And on top of that, she was exhausted. No energy, just couldn't get through the day. So we didn't jump into killing anything right away. We started where we talked about in the series, addressed water intake, opened up elimination pathways, and made sure that her diet and her habits were clean so we weren't bringing anything new in. We supported her body's ability to function, and then we addressed parasites and supported her bacterial balance. And within 2 months, she told me she had more energy, more stamina, and she wasn't getting tired all the time. And what really stood out to me is she said she hadn't had any urinary infections. After dealing with that pattern over and over again, that was a big shift. When you follow the right order, when you support your body instead of overwhelming it, things can start to shift, sometimes faster than you expect. I've seen many clients start to notice improvements in their energy within the first month. Pretty typical. Not because they're forcing the body, but because we're finally working with it. Your body's designed to heal, and when we remove the blocks and give it what it needs, it does that. So if you're feeling stuck, if you've tried things and nothing has worked, there is a path forward, and you don't have to figure it out by guessing. That's exactly why I use the Root Cause Landscape Core Health Blood Panel. It gives us clarity, so we know where to start and how to move forward step by step. I look forward to helping you soon.